the B-1, the B-2, the F-22, the F-18, everything else. We have a big picture up there, and the Chinese general comes and looks at that and just about does something in his trousers. And I'm telling you, that is very, very, very important to us. But again, I go back to this, our high costs are still going to be personnel and the programs it takes to support those. And although the all-volunteer force is great, I don't say bring back a draft, but unless we get some kind of national service, look what we have had to fork out in the expectations that have now been raised to support this force. And I'm just telling you, to grow it and to keep it going, I'm not sure. It's going to force us to give up those things that give us presence and allow us to project power, to keep the manpower. And I just think we need to look at that.
That's a bit of a contradiction. We don't, by the way, I spoke at an interoperability conference 2 weeks later, and they couldn't accept my version of PowerPoint. So there's a message there, too. You don't necessarily save people, save manpower with unmanned systems. And so where they can truly deliver manpower savings, sure. I would caution, the one concern I have is not the white scarf, keep the O Club open fighter pilot issue. It's a moral issue. I don't want using military force to be too easy. And the more you reduce presence on the battlefield, in the air, at sea, the less risk. You know, if we make it almost devoid of risk, I just think military power is going to be too easy to use.
Well, there's something else to keep in mind here, too. There are plenty of stories in there, not apocryphal, of 07s and 08s, personally directing squad leaders on the ground because he can see them. That will destroy the chain of command, the growth of military brains in the services. You've got to be very, very careful about technology, and we see what happens when technology, what happens on the ground when technology becomes the main thing.
I got to offer a counterpoint, though. It just makes me nervous. You know, at the height of Vietnam, we probably had 550,000 U.S. troops on the ground in Vietnam. We did a back-of-the-envelope analysis. There couldn't have been more than 30,000 of us carrying guns in company troop-sized units on the ground. There is no crowd at the forward edge of the battle area, let me tell you. It's a bunch of 19-year-old boys and girls crawling around in the mud with a handful of 25-year-olds. So I'm an unabashed supporter of UAVs, robotics. If you can give us a technology edge, if I thought the air power could win the war, I'd do away with the Army. It's a very ineffective way to fight people at a range of 20 feet. Even 3 kilometers with an M1 tank starts to push it. But so we do need to go UAV. Some things haven't changed and never will in warfare, but the impact of persistent eyes on target in Afghanistan and Iraq is beyond belief. And robotics, send somebody into the cave, send somebody in the house, defuse the IED, that's magic. So we need to pay up front for that kind of thing.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. One of the things we have to keep in mind, however, is something I mentioned earlier, and that is the battle is always bifurcated. It's one thing to take the place. It's something else, again, to hold on to it. It's much more difficult to hold on to it with robotic devices. You have to have some 19-year-old kid with a fixed bayonet and so on. It's a bit like getting married. It's easy to get married. It's tough to stay married. And we need to think about the use of the military instrument of power in the same way. Get on the ground, kill all the bad guys, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to occupy the terrain, and that's going to be like you and me 112 years ago. Sir.